while we have our entire board here, I will call the meeting to order at 6:08. That's mountain time. Our next item on the agenda, please stand and recite the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda, posting verification. Who can do that? I can do that. Anyone else? Thank you. Okay. We do adhere to the Opens Meeting Act, and our mission statement is posted on the wall, inspiring our youth and expecting results every day. Roll call is next. Everyone is present. And we will move into discussion items. The first one is to allow the board to review informational meetings and proposed building updates. Does anyone have anything they would like to share? I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to attend, and that includes the public as well. BD and Wilkins and First National Capital Markets. Appreciated the input, the comments, all of that. So I just would like to thank everyone for that. Any other comments I would like to be shared? If there are none, we will move on to our next discussion item. Consideration and adoption of a resolution authorizing the issuance by the district, its limited tax obligation school bond series 2022 in an aggregate principal amount to not exceed $1,100,000 to finance certain building improvements.
Want me to pull up here?
Yes, Tobin, that would be great.
Okay, so the resolution for your consideration is it's called limited tax obligation, which is the official term for QCPUF bonds. So QCPUF bonds are qualified capital purpose undertaking fund bonds. By statute in Nebraska, a school district can issue the amount of bonds that they could pay back by levying no more than 3 cents annually based on your valuation to pay that debt service back. The qualified capital purpose undertaking fund bonds are to address things such as life safety code issues, security issues, ADA accessibility barriers, fire safety and things like that. So the 1.1 million is a parameter. So in your resolution, it states not to exceed that amount. So for tonight, you're just approving a maximum that you would potentially issue under the QCPUF fund statute. The projects that we have identified working with, QTAC Rock is a bond attorney working on your behalf. So what they're doing is providing the resolution, making sure that everything you're considering doing is a qualifying project under the QCPUF statute. So they needed to see exactly what was being considered to be funded with these bonds. And so worked with BD Construction to help break out and estimate some of those things. So I would say the qualifying components are all part of the existing structure. Part of it is the secure entry addition. Usually QCPUF bonds are not for new construction, but bond attorneys have gotten comfortable when you have an entrance that no longer meets the guidelines, what's considered a safe entrance. A lot of schools are doing an extension and creating kind of that entry vestibule and things like that. So that's one component. All the fire safety upgrades and components in this building, AD accessible restrooms, and I think that's about it. So
The elevator, one of those, okay.
the elevator, that's right, the elevator is the fourth component. So those items add up to a little, right around that 1.1 million, so that's what you're considering tonight as far as QC Puff bonds. They can be paid back over 10 years. They are a pretty low rate bond. Rates have gone up on bonds, but they're a shorter term bond. They are actually, that QC Puff levy is outside your $5 levy limit. So your $5 levy limit includes your general fund levy and your building fund levy. The QC Puff allows boards by majority vote to issue these QC Puff bonds to address those kind of issues. So that's what this limited tax obligation bond resolution is referring to. So they all have to,
And we did secure a QC Puff loan when we bought the new boiler in Palisade 10 years ago, and that was for $120,000. It was a QC Puff loan we did, so we've been through this process before too.
and that's been paid off.
Yes,
And
that's
so.
paid off, right.
So the resolution has what's called minute extracts, which will include who was in attendance, who if someone does make the motion. There's a bold-faced motion paragraph included in your resolution document that if you want to move forward and someone wants to make that motion, usually a board member will read that paragraph, or sometimes someone reads it on behalf of the board and someone makes the motion, however you normally do it. So for that portion, for the QC Puff bond, it takes a motion, a second, and a majority vote of the board to provide the authorization for that. I guess still yet to be determined exactly how much you guys would decide to take and lock in a rate. Things like that.
Alright. Do you want to do that? So
Maybe
here,
one more.
one more?
See that right
This?
there? Yeah,
Okay.
that's the motion language the bond attorney provided.
Okay. Sorry, Amy's bothering me. Okay, the resolution reads, a resolution ratifying, confirming, and approving the formation of the Wauneta Palisade Educational
Oh,
Facilities.
that's the wrong one.
What?
That's the next one.
Did I put it in the wrong file?
Here's this one.
Okay. 'Cause I had that. Okay.
Right.
Oh, it is a little bit different. Okay, a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale by Chase County School District 0536, Wauneta Palisade Schools in the state of Nebraska of its limited tax obligation school bonds series 2022 in one or more series in the aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $1,150,000 for the purpose of paying the cost of the project described herein, authorizing certain officials to determine the final aggregate principal amount, maturities, rates, redemption provisions, terms, and other details of such bonds, imposing a tax to pay the principal of, premium if any, and interest on such bonds, designating the bonds as qualified tax exemption obligations, authorizing the sale and delivery of the bonds to the purchaser thereof, adopting certain post-issuance tax compliance and disclosure policies and procedures with respect to the bonds, authorizing certain actions and documents, and prescribing other matters related thereunto.
And you said 1,150,000. Does that say 1,100,000?
In parentheses it does,
But the wording is correct.
but the wording is incorrect.
Yeah, so just make it clear before someone makes a motion, it's 1,100,000. That,
Okay.
we'll change that. That'll
Okay.
match your agenda item.
Okay,
So they must not have changed the words.
okay.
The number in the parentheses is actually the most important part.
1,000,000.
We'll just strike through 50.
Yep, okay. Alright. Okay, with that correction, should not exceed $1,100,000. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Thank you, John. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Lori. Any further discussions or questions? Okay. We will proceed to vote. Hondo,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
and yes. Okay. Alright, would you go in all be voted, please? Okay. Right, our next item on the agenda is to consider an adoption of resolution authorizing the creation of the Wauneta Educational Facilities Leasing Corporation, authorizing the district to enter into one or more lease purchase financings with said corporation in an aggregate principal amount that shall not exceed $3,200,000 for the purpose of leasing certain educational facilities and equipment from the corporation. This is the one you need to read now?
Well, I can walk through this real quick
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
'cause
I
this
just wanna
is
make sure I got
slightly
the right
different. So this is a resolution to consider both forming an educational leasing facilities corporation and also enter into a lease agreement up to, same type of thing, not to exceed that $3.2 million. A lot of districts are utilizing a leasing corporation, again, by statute. The reason that leasing corporations are a part of this lease purchase type financing is that the way lease purchases are done today are quite a bit different than they were maybe 10 plus years ago. There was a lawsuit, a school lawsuit with Wisner Pilger about these lease agreements. They used to look more like bonds, and they could be sold out in a bunch of pieces like a bond issue. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Wisner Pilger District won that case that the school district and the board had the right to form a leasing corporation to do a project similar to this. But one thing that changed with the bond attorneys who are structuring this financing for you, tax exempt, is that it needs to not look like a bond issue, but really be entered into with one financial institution. So your QCPUF bonds, we will sell those out. We'll talk to local banks. Those 10 years may go to 10 different banks. Your lease agreement is different in that it's like a rental agreement with one bank. What's unique about it, what the corporation does for the district and for your overall cost, is it creates a nonprofit corporation to basically work through to achieve this project. If you don't have that, because it's not sold like a bond or security, technically if you were going to enter into an agreement with a bank, the bank is buying your project and renting it to you. A bank is not a not-for-profit organization like a school, so there would be sales tax implications. So on a $3 million project, if sales tax here is, I don't know what it is, 6%, something similar, then somebody's going to pay $180,000 in sales tax for the project. And so the lease purchase statute allows the formation of a leasing corporation as a nonprofit to assist a school district in achieving a project and make it more financially achievable, I guess. And so again, I'm not putting this together, we're relying on your bond attorney to file the paperwork, to organize this, to make sure we do everything correctly so that it is a tax exempt lease purchase. And so what's technically happening is that leasing corporation is entering into the agreement with the bank. It is secured, however, by the school district's taxing authority under your special building fund. And as you asked me to look at the amount that this lease purchase could be, it basically will designate the payback of this lease. Its maximum is 7 years under the lease purchase statute, different than the QCPUF. The amount you'll tax in your building fund or designate for your payments is under that 14 that you already currently have in place. I think that's why I've heard you talk about not an increase in taxes for the lease purchase part, because it's already there and you're just designating part of that to make these payments. And so our normal process is directed by you, the board, for this, is we basically try to run a competitive process to get you the best rate possible. We definitely always include the local bank if the local bank's interested and you want us to do that. If you also want 3 or 4 regional banks to also respond to that so that you guys can look at potential interest rates for these 7 years, and you can take into account other components to it in your decision making. But my job would be to try to run a competitive process to get you the best rate possible, bring it to you and show you a comparison and help you see the cost of each bank and what they're proposing, and then you would make that decision on, we want to enter into a lease agreement with this financial institution. A lot of schools, it will end up doing it locally if that works out, and I think that's a great opportunity for everyone, but also I think some boards feel like they gotta at least have, they usually ask me to at least make sure we have some other options to look at and make sure we're trying to get the best deal possible for the overall cost of the district. So this resolution is in consideration of forming that corporation and entering into a lease purchase agreement up to that amount. It authorizes it. It doesn't, you haven't entered into it tonight. It just says that's in place and you can use it. If this project is done and gets paid off, that corporation can be in place for the next 50 years if something else comes along 20 years from now or 30 years from now and none of us are sitting in the same seats. It could be utilized for another project in the future. Those corporations don't usually meet until they have to, but certainly they can have a yearly meeting and things like that. So
I will read the resolution. A resolution ratifying, confirming, and approving the formation of the Wauneta Palisade Educational Facilities Leasing Corporation and the assistance of such corporation in providing for the financing of educational facilities for use by the district, authorizing the district to undertake one or more lease or lease purchase financings for the acquisition, construction, improvement, and equipping of certain educational facilities for use by Chase County School District 0536, Wauneta Palisade Public Schools in the state of Nebraska, authorizing the execution and delivery by the district and the corporation of documents relating to such financings, authorizing district officers and corporation officers to determine the amount, payments and dates, effective interest rates, prepayment provisions, and other terms and details of such financings, all subject to the parameters set forth herein, designated the financings as qualified tax-exempt obligations, adopting certain post-issuance compliance procedures with respect to the financings, and authorizing certain actions and documents and prescribing other matters relating thereunto.
and I've talked a lot. I just remember some things I kind of want to add on this for your consideration. So usually when we send that out to banks, it's a little different than a bond. It behaves more like a loan. So we usually tell the banks that are going to respond that we would like no prepayment penalty on it. So if for whatever reason you have funds, the opportunity to pay it off early or any time, whereas a bond usually has a 5-year period where you're locked in. You can't do anything with that. The banks that buy all those pieces want a guarantee for 5 years before you'd ever do anything. This is way more flexible. It really looks more like a mortgage or a car loan where you could actually retire at any time if you had the ability to do so.
And this is 12 cents in our building levy, is that?
That's the preliminary. Actually, the 3.2, because it's a parameter, would probably take you closer to that 14. I don't think we intend to go that high. We've talked about 3 million. And the other thing I forgot to add is this lease purchase would be tied to your new addition part of the project. So in a way, we will eventually ask the design people to provide a legal description of that, because technically it's leased until the final payment's made and then the district owns it. So the lease is tied to a portion of the new addition. You're paying cash for part of the new addition. And then the QC Club is tied to life safety code parts of the renovation project.
Thank you, Aaron. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, Marty beat you. Is that okay? Okay, any further discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. John?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Yes, and Hondo? Alright, motion is passed. We don't have a need for executive session. And our next regular meeting is, I believe, May 9th. Does that sound right? Yeah. Okay. At 6 o'clock Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Central here. Okay. The meeting is adjourned at 6:28.